Continuing on, we're in chapter 6 of Mark. It's kind of a lengthy chapter, but it's got big chunks of it, so I think we can go through it, get it all tonight. 1 through 3. Then he went out from there and came to his own country, and his disciples followed him. Okay, what happened last week? You always got to go back, because this book is one great big book.
They followed him.
They did, but what happened right before that? The little girl was healed. Jairus' daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
From then, okay, that's where it starts out. Then he went from there and came to his own country. So he wasn't near Nazareth. He wasn't too close to Nazareth. We don't know exactly where Jairus was at, where, synagogue he was at. There's one at Capernaum. There's one in every major town there, but we don't know. Okay? But anyway, he moved away from there and went into his own country. And his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue. So he went to the synagogue. And many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" So they were offended at him. So we know he went back to Nazareth, because that's where his family was. One of the things that they said, one of the commentators said that I thought was interesting, that Jesus didn't leave the home until the last one, the last child, or last male child, was able to work and able to help his mother and whoever was underneath. I don't know. It doesn't list how many daughters she had or sisters he had. And we don't know if they were in between those brothers. Okay, we show in James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. So he had 4 brothers. So they could have been intermingled in there, but whenever the youngest one.
Because he's so prominent, we forget sometimes that he had relatives.
Yeah, now some people say, and it is true, where it says, "is not his brothers and the brother of so-and-so, so-and-so." Isn't this part of his family? So some people say that, and a lot of the Roman Catholics will say, that's not his brothers, that it's a family. So it's his cousins or something like that. But a lot of the commentators believe that it was his family. Because later on, James is James, what we call James the Last, which is the James that wrote the book of James. He's also one of the leaders of the church. None of his brothers understood him while his ministry was going on. It was after, okay? The only one that really understood him was his mother. And so his mother and his sisters, his brothers and his sisters didn't really follow him. And they're like, they were like, where did this guy come from? Typically, if you're a rabbi, you go and you follow a rabbi around. You learn from a rabbi. You go to the synagogue school and learn from them. What did Jesus do? He's a carpenter. He learned from his dad. Okay? He worked until he was 30 years old, about 30 when his ministry started. He worked and he took care of the family, because apparently we don't know exactly when, but Joseph had died somewhere in between.
There. Yeah.
Right. And he was the head
They
of
would take care of that.
And it's kind of a slander, a little bit. Isn't this the guy that, kind of saying that, isn't this the one that didn't have a father?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it goes, some of the wording was like that. What do you think of when you think of carpenter?
Builder.
A builder?
Which
Woodworker?
Yeah, they are.
but it also means it's a builder. That's a better description of the Greek word
Yeah.
than carpenter is.
But it's also could be a description of his ministry too.
Well, it is. He built and he builds the church and he does all that. That's part of it. God, what did he build? Everything.
Heaven and earth.
Everything. Universe, everything. So that makes it great, doesn't it? God's a builder. His son's a builder. Both of them are. Builder also means, and we've talked about this before, he probably was more likely a mason.
Oh, I thought about that.
Stone mason. There's not too many trees up there in the northern part of Galilee.
You followed Jesus, brother, ever since the masonry?
That's right. That's part of it, that there's more rock and stone there. So that was probably predominantly in the building, okay, part of it, building buildings. They used wood, of course, to make the framework, but then they put the rock around it and up, to make the roofs, they had to put wood across it, things like that. So we see that those things kind of coincide with this. It says, throughout the centuries, some people have thought that Jesus' employment as a carpenter somehow discredited his message. In ancient Rome, there was a terrible persecution under the Emperor Julian. At that time, a philosopher mocked a Christian, asking him, what do you think the carpenter's son is doing now? The Christian said, he's building a coffin for Julian. So, sometimes we it's one of those things, we get ahead of ourselves. But Jesus learned as a carpenter, there's a lot of potential in a log or a stone, okay? It takes a little bit of work, it takes a lot of work to make something usable. He learned that the finest things are made from the hardest wood.
It's also not easy work.
It isn't. Also, the son of Mary, this is what I was talking about also, is not a compliment. The additional phrase, the son of Mary, is probably disparaging. It was contrary to Jewish usage to describe a man as a son of his mother. You always say Simon Bar-Jonah, that's son of Jonah. Matthew, son of Alphaeus, Bar-Alphaeus. Here they're saying son of Mary. So it is just a little bit discrediting him, okay? Because they see him as, one that was born outside of wedlock. How much of suspicion and contempt may have lurked behind that particular description of him? The lack of mention of Joseph perhaps implies that he died when Jesus was young. We don't know exactly, like I said, when he died. And then they were offended. His family and neighbors and everybody else was offended at Jesus' preaching because they couldn't understand how he taught so. He hadn't been learned. And much like the fishermen that he took on as his disciples, they were unlearned also. And that's what he wanted. He didn't go after, we talked about this before, he didn't go after the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We know he got some of those because we know Joseph of Arimathea. We know he had an effect on Nicodemus. We know a lot of this. We don't know everything.
Don't you think that some of the people that was offended also might be a little jealous? Because where did he get all this?
Yeah.
How come we don't have it?
He's having a following. That's right. Yeah. That's a lot of jealousy. Okay, Brother Everson, 4 through 6.
But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house. Now he could do no mighty works except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. Then he went about the village in a circuit teaching.
Okay. So, because we see something that's interesting here, because they would not believe in him, he did not want to waste his time I'll say it this way, with them. So he went out. I'm not going to say that he couldn't do it. He could heal, but the people there, because of that unbelief of his family, that just spreads out. It's just like a virus. And everybody says, well, he can't be healing me. I know him. He can't heal anybody. He's just a carpenter. So,
Yeah, what makes him special?
yeah. But they may have heard of him doing these things, and what he did, he marveled at their unbelief. He had just, a few chapters earlier, marveled at the faith of a Gentile, that he didn't have to touch him. He marveled at the faith of a lady that had an issue of blood, and all she had to do was touch him. And now he's marveling at their unbelief. That they don't want to believe, even though they see things happen right before their eyes, they're not believing. That's my interpretation of it. We never read that Jesus marveled at art or architecture or even the wonders of creation. He never marveled at human ingenuity or invention. He didn't marvel at the piety of the Jewish people or the military dominance of the Roman Empire, but Jesus did marvel at faith when it was present in an unexpected place, and when it was absent where it should have been. So he marveled both ways. So he went about and he left that area around Nazareth and he started his teaching. And we notice, if you look at a map where Jesus went, it was like kind of our circuit riders that we had early on. They didn't have a lot of out on the wild, wild west. You always see these, circuit riding preachers. Because there's not that many churches out there where those guys are moving cattle and there were a bunch of ranches, there's no big towns. That's what he did. He went around and was spreading the gospel all around where he could go. Okay, Iris, 7 through 13.
And he called the 12 to himself and began to send them out two by two and gave them power over unclean spirits. He commanded them to take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bag, no bread, no copper in their money belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on two tunics. Also, he said to them, in whatever place you enter a house, stay there till you depart from that place. And whosoever will not receive you nor hear you when you depart from there, shake off the dust under your feet as a testimony against them. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So they went out and preached that people should repent, and they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them.
Okay. So we see this, we've read about it, we saw it on The Chosen, where he sent them out two by two. Here it's just his disciples. He sent them out more than once, but in this particular case, he sent them out and he tells them, don't just take, one set of clothes. Don't take any money with you. Don't take something, just take your walking stick with you. That's all you need to take. And he wanted them to do as he did, to go and teach. And he actually gave them power to cast out demons. They anointed people with oil, and many who were sick were healed. So they did what he was doing. It's hard for one person to accomplish much, isn't it? I mean, you can, but today with our society, as far as Wi-Fi and phones and all that, you can get a lot of people. We was watching a show the other night on Prime. It's called, Darla likes to watch the game shows, and the reality shows where people are playing a game. There's one called Beast Games.
Oh,
Beast Games.
never heard
And, well, you haven't. It's on Prime.
of it. Oh.
It's not on the regular channels. But what come about is this guy's named Jim or Jimmy Beast is his name, I guess, or that's the name he's taken. He is a YouTube sensation. Okay, if you talk to any of the young kids, oh yeah, I know him, Mr. Beast. You know, he does all this weird stuff and all whatever he does. He had gotten up so high now, he convinced Prime to put on a show where they're going to give away $5 million. They started with 1,000 people, and each week they cut it down by half. All these different things they have to do, and all these things that are going on.
Wow.
But I read about him. He's worth $700 million,
Sheesh.
and all he does is that YouTube stuff.
Now what?
That's
What happened to us?
We missed the boat, people.
We missed the boat.
Yeah, he makes his money by now advertising and doing things, and he joined up with Prime, Amazon, to make this game.
Wow.
And they're having people watch it, and they've got advertisements on it, of course, just like watching ABC or CBS or anything else. So, but that's what it can happen now, seemingly overnight. That's one reason or one sign that we're in the end times. Something can happen. You know, when the earthquake happened the other day in Boston or north of Boston, it was out as far as it was on the internet and spread everywhere. So it could happen. Back then, they didn't know anything about that. It had to spread by word of mouth as you went from city to city to city. Okay? You don't listen to the news.
Well, I thought I did.
Yeah, it was like a 3.8 off of north of Boston
I
somewhere.
remember the time about it. Yeah.
But they actually showed one camera from like a weather station that was sitting there looking, and the ground didn't move, but the tower was just shaking like crazy. So they went out and he told them to go to these places, these foreign places, and take only what you need as far as, you know, you need your walking staff, you need a pair of sandals, and you need one tunic, one pair of clothes. And when you go into these cities, go and stay with the first person that you join up with, if they'll let you stay in that house, and if they'll let you preach and do your time there, fine. If they don't, go out of that city and knock the dirt off your feet and go on about your business. Okay? And it said, I will be more tolerable than Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. And there were some cities like that, okay, that they just did not, and that was represented in the chosen. You know, some of the disciples that went over there, some of the places they got kicked out. They were, you know, about run out on a rail almost.
Someone's coming. They didn't believe the same thing.
Oh no, they did. Some of them that were truly, really Jewish to the core, yeah, they'd run them out because it was a teaching that they were different than what they were used to. Okay?
We didn't want change.
No. So now we take a little side note. After he sent his disciples out, Mark throws this story in about John the Baptist because it'll tie together at the end. We'll read it here in just a minute. Bertha, go ahead and read 14 through 16.
Now King Herod heard of him, for his name had become well known. And he said, John the Baptist is risen from the dead, and therefore these powers are at work with him. Others said, is Elijah? And others said, is the prophet, or like one of the prophets. But when Herod heard, he said, this is John, whom I beheaded. He has been raised from the dead.
Okay. Now this is the second time we've heard about John. The first time early on, he put him in jail.
Yeah.
They said it's about a year or so before this time. So John was in Herod's dungeon or Herod's jail for about a year. Some people have said that. And this Herod, okay, Herod the Great was the one that killed the babies when Jesus was born, when he was little, so that's 3 BC. This is one of his sons. Okay? They call him King Herod, but he really wasn't a king. Caesar did not give him the title of king. He's Herod the Tetrarch. Tetrarch means of the fourth. Okay? Herod had 4 sons that he gave rule over when he died. They took over. Now, he had more than 4 sons, but these 4 are the ones that he took over. And this Herod was the one that took his brother's wife. Okay, Philip was his brother that was ruler of the Decapolis, I think, over there. Maybe not. I've heard that both sides. There were 2 Philips. I'm not really sure. But anyway, he took that Philip's wife, and her name was Herodias. You know who Herodias, what the relationship, besides being man and wife, between between Philip and Herodias? Because they're brothers, okay? Herodias was their niece. Okay. So, it was another brother's child. Yeah, girl. Yeah, another one. So they took it. And John called this out for 2 reasons. The one that we hear most of, because you got your brother's wife, but also it's incest. It's called out by incest. And the other, when Moses, if you go back to the law, it's incest. For both of them. Okay, either way.
Okay, Herodias is his brother Philip's wife.
Right.
Or he had married her.
Mm-hmm.
Is it not lawful?
No, well, it's lawful to him because he's ruler. Okay, he had a wife before, and he put her away. And when he divorced her, she was the princess of what I understood was Arabia. So the king didn't like it. And he came and he beat the snot out of Herod and basically ran him out later in life. Okay, a little bit later in this time period. So because of all this, so you can see there's a bit of justice done there a little bit. But anyway, let's go ahead and read 17 through 29. It's a long article. I'll read it. For Herod himself had sent and laid hold of John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her. Okay, so that tells you a lot right there in that sentence. John called it out. Because John had said to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." Therefore Herodias held it against him and wanted to kill him. But she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man, and he protected him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly. Then an opportune day when Herod came, when Herod on his birthday gave a feast for his nobles, the high officers and the chief men of Galilee. And when Herodias' daughter herself came in and danced and pleased Herod and those who sat with him, the king said to the girl, "Ask me whatever you want, and I will give it to you."
That was not chosen.
Yeah. He also swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom." So she went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask?" And she said, and I think that means her mother, "The head of John the Baptist." Immediately she came in with haste to the king and asked, saying, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was exceedingly sorry, yet because of the oaths and because of those who sat with him, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent an executioner and commanded his head to be brought. And he went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. When the disciples heard of it, they came and took away his corpse and laid it in a tomb. Okay, so this is kind of a side story of what happened, okay, to John, what had happened to him. And it said the disciples, I never thought of it this way, that it was John's disciples, I'm sure. Okay, because they knew John was there. Some of them we've seen, as we saw in The Chosen, some of them had came over. We know Andrew and Philip had followed John for a while. And, well, we know at least two of them. We know one of them was Andrew. The show shows it was Philip. And some of the others had started following him, asking the questions. They were going back between John and, finding out. Because they still wanted to keep up, because John had did the same thing as Jesus. He told his disciples, go out and do what I do. Okay? So his disciples came out and they took John's body and laid it in a tomb. So now John's disciples didn't have anywhere to go. So some of them, I'm sure, went to Jesus. And some of them, I'm sure, just probably disappeared. They probably quit following him. They were more strict on the Jewish guidelines. So I'm sure some of the things that they followed, they didn't like either. We know some of his disciples, Jesus' disciples, they came and went from Jesus himself, stayed with him, and some of them didn't. So we can just imagine that this dance was probably pretty provocative, pretty, anything got him hot and bothered, so to say. And that's one reason why he gave in to that. Now you got to realize this was not his daughter. This was Philip's daughter, or Philip's daughter. But still yet, it was something that it was his party, he was probably drunk or halfway drunk and probably didn't want, but it sobered him up real quick when she asked him, to do that. He was sorry. He had made an oath. The Bible tells us don't make, oaths, don't make rash statements. It says, neither was it long ere this tyrant Herod had his payment from Herod. In order to take his brother's wife, Herodias, Herod put away his first wife, a princess from a neighboring kingdom to the east. Her father was offended and came against Herod with an army, defeating him in battle. Then his brother Agrippa accused him of treason against Rome, and he was banished into the Roman province of Gaul, where Herod and Herodias committed suicide.
Do you think Herod did that because of what he had did?
They did, yeah, because they lost everything that they had. And see then his brother Agrippa, that's another Herod. That's the one that we're going to see later on in Jesus in Mark here. Herod Agrippa, and during Paul's time, and those, after this time. So their ultimate, they didn't last very long, okay, basically. Brother Epson, 30 through 34.
Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, come aside by yourself to a desert place and rest for a while. For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they departed to this deserted place in the boat by themselves. But the multitude saw them departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. And they arrived before them and came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw great multitudes and was moved with compassion for them, because they were like sheep not having a shepherd, so he began to teach them many things.
Okay. So we jump back from the story where Jesus was, just before he's coming out of his city and had sent his disciples off, and now the apostles have come back. Said then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. Okay, so Jesus was getting an understanding and patting them on the back, giving them good things, and he's telling them, come aside to a deserted place and let's rest a while. I know you guys are tired. Okay, you guys got to do that. So they went from that place. They didn't even have time to eat. He just said, let's get in the boat, go across. Well, while they were going, and you can see the Sea of Galilee at most is like 7 miles across. It's a lot, I don't know how far, 13 or 14 miles north-south. But from going from one place to another, if you're going just across to the top of it, they may have had a headwind or something and had a hard time rowing, but the people saw what they were doing. And they just followed them, okay, all the way across and got there before they did. And they were wanting to rest for a while, get away from the people, because it was, as we've seen in the show and we've seen here, Jesus himself went to rest. I mean, he would go up into a mountain and pray for a while. But here he had compassion upon them. He said, look, let's go ahead and tell the people, I want to teach them. So he began teaching them. Said each face reflected a need, a hunger, or a hurt. Being a thoroughly other-centered person, Jesus cared more about the needs of someone else than he cared about his own needs. He saw them as sheep without a shepherd. They were wanting something more every time he had preached to them. They learned more and more from him. Okay, next one, Iris.
When the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, this is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away, that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. But he answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? But he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them to make them all sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in ranks, in hundreds and in 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments of the fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men.
Okay. So they were in this place that was, and we say deserted, it means it's sparse. It was out away from everybody. That's where they were trying to get away from, people they wouldn't think they would come, but they did. And they didn't have anything there. After Jesus had taught most of the day, he sees the disciples see the people's getting tired, they're getting tired. They say, we don't have anything to eat here, and we can't provide it for them. Let's send these people away. Okay? Send them out. And Jesus said, no, you guys give them something. And they're like, okay, let's get our change out of here, people. See how much we got. How much is 200 denarii? Don't have a clue. I didn't either. One place, I think it may be here, or maybe in another one, said that's about a half a year's pay. For them. If you're going about, you go back to the story of the guy they were laboring during the day. They got a penny a day, basically, is what they got. Here it's saying, even if we had a half a year's salary, that probably wouldn't be enough to feed these people. That's what they were trying to say with him. And he said, okay, let's see. What do you guys got? Show me what you got. Here, Mark doesn't say it's from a little boy, but Luke tells us that it was. He said, look, here, we got 5 loaves and 2 fishes, about enough to feed 1, maybe 2 people. The little boy probably came with his dad, and they probably had in their basket enough to feed themselves. A couple of fish and 5 loaves of bread. And the loaves wasn't like our loaves. It'd be like a biscuit, one for, each one of them. And the fish, or you have a couple of loaves of bread. Fish. Now, that's pretty small pickings, isn't it?
Don't you think though, that little kid, wow,
Yeah, yeah.
my little lunch got all these people.
They had all these people. Then he told them all, hey, you guys tell them all, go sit down in groups of 50s and 100s. So they went down and sat down. And what did he do first?
Pray.
He blessed it. He looked up to heaven, blessed it, and broke the loaves. So when Jesus blessed the meal, he didn't bless the food before the meal. He blessed God for supplying it. The idea of praying before a meal isn't to bless the food. It's to bless God in the sense of thanking and honoring him for blessing us with the food. So he started breaking that bread, and I don't think he had to sit there and keep breaking and breaking and breaking. I think he broke it, put over here this bit. Okay, take them baskets out. And they're like, this ain't going to feed nothing. And then they open the basket up, and it's full. And they start handing it out, and it stays full. And it keeps staying full. And then he did the fish too. So they did all that, and they provided. Said Jesus provided extravagantly, yet simply. Each one of them ate. They all ate. They ate till they were full. Tells us how many baskets did they take up? They took up 12 baskets full afterwards. He wasn't going to let that waste. Let's get all that food. Let's get all the extra. We can use it tomorrow. We're going to use it. So Jesus can provide the assurance, even miraculously, for all of our needs. It was to the earliest Christians one of the things that they put their faith on. On the walls of the catacombs and other places in early Christian art, what do you see? Loaves and fishes are common pictures. I don't know if you've seen my sweat that I have on, and it's a Hebrew loaf. It's like an L, and fishes. It's got 2 letters on it, and that stands for loaves and fishes. And that's what they showed in early Christian catacombs back then, along with the fish, the symbol of the fish.
Well, U.S. dollars, a denarius in today's, it is 0.6. 0.6. And that's a dollar.
That's today. Yeah, that's today.
Can you imagine what it was way back?
Oh, yeah. So they had the assurance from Jesus that they could feed everybody. Jesus could have just left this behind, the baskets, but he didn't. Jesus generously provides, but he doesn't waste things. It isn't because Jesus is cheap or doesn't trust for future provision. He simply knew that wastefulness didn't glorify the God of all provision. I've seen kids that they'll take one bite of something and then they'll say, okay, that's a little throw it away. I'm like, that's food, son. You need to eat that. Or girl, or give it to me, I'll eat it. I won't order me anything. Okay, you read that, Bertha, or did Iris read it? Bertha, read the next one, 45 and 46.
Which page are we on?
13.
Oh, at the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus walks on water.
Yep. A little bit up above it. 2 scriptures right above it.
Oh. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray.
Okay. So here, he did go ahead and send everybody, dispersed everybody after they were fed. And then they left, and he told the disciples, you go all and go across the ocean, go across the lake here, and I'm going to go pray. Because he had just, here again, done a miracle, and he needed to recuperate. He needed to go back and recharge himself from God. Then then on the next page it says, now when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Just to set the story, I told you the Sea of Galilee is below sea level. It's anywhere you go up, anywhere you go away from Galilee, you go up. So it's in a big valley, okay? So the sea level's up there. So Jesus went up on a mountain and said to pray. So he just went up the hill ways, and he could see the disciples out there rowing. He saw them straining and rowing, for the wind was against them. Now about the fourth watch of the night, which is about 3 in the morning, 3 or 4, he came to them walking on the sea, and he would have passed them by. And when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost, and cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. But immediately he talked with them and said to them, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. Then he went up into the boat to them, and the wind ceased, and they were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure, and marveled, for they had not understood about the loaves, because their heart was hardened. These are his disciples. They had just seen a miracle happen, and it just happened right there in front of them. Now, one of the other authors, one of the Gospels, this is where Peter saw. He got out, they think. It's the same one. He got out. And Mark doesn't mention that because who wrote down this for Mark? Who was giving Mark the information? Peter. Peter probably didn't want to know that little particular item. I got out. Yeah, I stood on the water for a minute or a second, and then I went down. So it could have been. Who knows? We don't know why it's not here, but we do know it's probably about the same thing. Another one of the authors say, then the boat, once he got in the boat, then the boat's over at the land. Ooh. As soon as he get in, they were amazed. The wind and everything calmed, and they were there where they were supposed to be. Now, I mean, to me, it's like, how do you know you're Jesus? Okay, I'm just going to walk across the water. I don't. That's to me awesome. I mean, I'm gonna take a shortcut here across.
It's kind of like, yep, I got him.
But then they saw it, and they were scared. They thought first it was a ghost. They thought crazy. Who in the world? They could see something out there. It's a storm. What's going on? The wind. And then he calmed their fears. He said, "It is I." This is kind of close to the very same phrase that God told Moses, "I am." Okay, it is I. So we see that even though they saw with their eyes the miracles of the bread, they didn't understand what some of the miracles that had happened before them. Let's see. We'll go on. The next one, I'll read it. Or I read it. Brother Epson, 53-56.
And when they crossed over, they came to the land of
Jerusalem. Yeah, good, close.
And anchored there. And when they came out of the boat, immediately the people recognized him and ran through the whole surrounding region and began to carry about on beds those who were sick to wherever they heard he was. Wherever he entered into villages, cities, or the country, they laid the sick in the marketplace and begged him that they might touch the hem of his garment, and as many as touched him were made well.
Okay. So his fame had spread. They came, and once he got out, started teaching, started preaching again, they went out and they grabbed everybody they could, and mom and dad or whoever was sick, and they brought them to him. And the disciples like, oh great, we've got more work to do. No, They may have been that way, and Jesus may have been, he did rest, but he didn't rest a lot, because he came walking to them at about 3 in the morning. Okay? I don't know how much Jesus actually rested during his 3 years that he was preaching and teaching. Sure didn't seem like he was very much, because he was always going out at night to pray. Seems like, or early in the morning to pray. So that kind of leads us to believe that we need to do a lot of praying. If he has to do a lot of praying, then we have to do a lot of praying. And that's about all I have tonight.
Thank you very much. It's good. Very good. Well, I'm going to take Miss Iris home since I go get my driver's